Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Someone sent me this story early afternoon yesterday, and I should have known because my inbox started exploding thereafter. Happened in Michigan. A friend of mine is a reporter on the story, and it happened at a place I'm very familiar with. And it's something we've talked about on this channel before, and that is the way insurance, car insurance works in various states. Michigan is a no-fault state, so that there's all kinds of issues that can arise if there are problems with your car, regardless of whether you're behind the wheel or not. So here's the headline from Fox 2. Charlie Langton wrote the story, and Charlie's a friend of mine. He's an attorney who got into television. He actually was an attorney and thought, I belong on TV. So he got a job in local radio, worked his way up, and eventually got himself onto Fox 2 Detroit. Charlie Langton and Dave Comer put the story together. Car owner who left Jeep at dealership gets sued after a worker dies during oil change. So he drops his car off at the Jeep dealership, says, guys, change the oil. A little while later, they go, there's been an incident with your car. One of our employees was behind the wheel and hit another employee who died. And now that man is getting sued. That is the owner of the car. On March 13th of 2020, the customer took his car to the Rochester Hills Chrysler Jeep Dodge dealership, and a young mechanic, 19 years old, was working on changing the oil, but something terrible happened. He starts the car, removes his foot from the clutch, and you know what happens? The Jeep jumps and kills my client, says his attorney. The vehicle hit and killed an employee who was a married 42-year-old father of four and a lifelong mechanic. The attorney says he was an excellent man. The 2-year-old, who was about 1 at the time of the accident, time of the death, he'll never know his father. And by the way, no one disputes any of this. This is one of those cases where everyone agrees on the facts. We all agree on the facts. And so they say that the man who died did die instantly. So Fox 2 asked the attorney, did the 19-year-old know how to drive a stick? Apparently the car had a manual transmission. The attorney says he didn't know how to drive a stick and he had no license. So the guy who was in the car behind the wheel at the time of the tragic accident did not have a license and did not know how to drive a stick, according to the attorney. So they asked him, why did the dealership hire him? And the attorney says, that's what I'd like to know. Now, Fox 2 says, but hold on 1 minute. They then asked, you must be suing the dealership. And the lawyer says, we can't because of a legal standard that is involved. Now, here's the thing. The legal standard he doesn't explain. But it says here, because the accident happened at work and involved 2 employees, you can't sue the boss in that situation. And I'm not 100% certain whether that's coming up because of, like, say, workman's comp or something. Or there might even be an issue as to who hired and supervised the 19-year-old. Because, of course, if it was the man who died, that'd be one thing. If it was a dealership, that'd be another. There's a bunch of issues here, and I'm not saying I know. I don't know. So I wish he'd been a little more specific about what he's talking about. But attorney for the plaintiff says the person responsible is the owner of the car. And under Michigan's no-fault law, there is a thing called owner liability. And if you have insurance on your car, which you're required to drive it on the road, and someone else is driving your car and bad things happen, the insurance on your car covers that incident. And it's just so unusual here because you'd think the dealership would have insurance. So Fox then asks, you're suing the owner of the car who's getting his oil changed, who did nothing in this case. And the attorney says, I have to do that. I have to do that. And Fox 2 writes, that's the law. We reached out to the car owner's attorney, but he had no comment on the pending litigation other than to say, they're going to fight it at a trial at the end of this month. And that attorney says, when you hand your car over to anybody, including the valet or the person at the service desk at your local dealership, you better be able to trust that person. And that's the issue. And so, simply put, man brings his car to a dealership, says change the oil. someone at the dealership who's an employee gets behind the wheel despite having no driver's license and not knowing how to drive a stick and hits somebody else and kills them with that car. And now the owner of the car is being sued, but the dealership is not. And that's one other thing I'm kind of curious about. I'm wondering why the insurance company doesn't go after the dealership. And I'll admit, I don't do auto negligence law. I've got several friends who do. I will tell you right now that I actually reached out to Charlie last night, sent him a note, said, hey, Charlie, can I talk to you? I'd like to ask you some questions about this case, because not just being a reporter, he's also an attorney. So I'm sure he'd have some more insight into this. Whether you can share it with me or not, I don't know. But I did call him. I just didn't get a call back, but I want to talk about this case because this is the crazy kind of stuff that can happen with owner liability. And that is that someone who wasn't even in the car can be sued for something that the car did because someone else was behind the wheel of it. And don't get me wrong, it is an absolute tragedy that the man died, an absolute tragedy. But I think that many people, and please note, I'm simply expressing an opinion here. I think many people are going to say, but shouldn't the guy behind the wheel be liable for what happens with the car while he's behind the wheel? And shouldn't the employer of the guy behind the wheel be on the hook somewhat? Because if I owned a car dealership and I had people working there and they had to move cars around from place to place, I think I would know which of my employees did not know how to drive, which of them did not have driver's licenses, which ones couldn't work a clutch. I would try to find these things out because, as you can imagine, cars get moved around a lot at car dealerships. And I've dealt with situations at car dealers before. I've never dealt with a wrongful death case, but I've had situations before where someone who didn't know how to drive a car got a car in an accident. And I famously told the story about the client who had a Corvette that was taken for a joyride and wrecked by a dealership employee. And that guy may have known how to drive. He just didn't know how to drive well. But that's the issue here. And the other real interesting thing about this is, I'm going to teach you a word. Every now and then I like to whip out the big words. And I know I've never used this word before. And if I have, I apologize. But there's a word in the law called a tortfeasor. Tortfeasor. And a tort is a wrong for which you can sue somebody in a civil action. Not a crime, but a tort. Criminal, civil, crime, tort. Okay? And a person who commits a tort is a tortfeasor. Okay? And you might say, Steve, why did they have to have that word? There can be several different layers of liability. And so let me give you an example. Suppose it's a big corporation that has a subsidiary that hires and trains people who do a job. And one of these guys screws up and kills somebody. Okay? Well, you can often sue that guy, obviously, because he did it, but you might be able to sue his direct supervisor for lack of supervision or hiring the wrong people. You might be able to sue the subsidiary corporation because they didn't oversee his corporation the way they should. And you might be able to sue the parent corporation for something else. And law students spend so much time looking at these other parties, because that's usually the tricky stuff, that I had a professor in law school who said, I'm going to warn you right now to the class. On the final exam, there's going to be a question that involves a bunch of different parties. And he goes, every single year, I get at least one student who forgets that you can always sue the guy who did it. People are always looking for other liability, other deep pockets that they forget. Oh, by the way, I can sue that guy. And he actually said the phrase, you can always sue the tortfeasor. Then he goes, repeat it after me. You can always sue the tortfeasor. You can always sue the tortfeasor. He had us chanting that. And he was trying to be funny. But the point is that a lot of people forget that. So here, the attorney for the decedent's family, the plaintiff, has chosen not to sue the tortfeasor. And it's not oversight. It's not like a final exam where he forgot to do it. He chose not to do it. And that's the real thing I think a lot of people are scratching their heads over. But the reason we're here primarily is because of owner liability and Michigan's crazy no-fault laws. So, car owner who left Jeep at dealership gets sued after worker dies during oil change. Charlie Langton, my good friend at Fox 2, covered the story along with David Comer. See, that's what happens. I don't have the glasses on. An M looks like it could be an RN. Got to thank everyone who sent it to me, including Santa, Mike, Jay, Robert, Stephen, Mark, Jeremy, Ryan, Stephen with a PH, Ron, Henry, Carlos, whose brother just graduated from law school. Congratulations, my friend. Pete, Robert, Eric, Highway, Daniel, Caleb, Frank, Scott, Harry, Jeremy, Brian, Rich, and Donald. And by the way, Carlos's brother, who just graduated law school, is Edgar. Congratulations, my friend. It was a long road, but it was worth it, right? There you go. So once again, car owner who left Jeep at dealership gets sued after worker dies during oil change. Car owner wasn't there, but he's getting sued anyway. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I used to be disgusted. Now I try to be amused.